The GameSir G7 Pro is both a wired and wireless Pro controller that you can use with PC, Xbox and Android, and it's got a solid list of features like TMR sticks, remappable buttons and haptic feedback. I've tried a lot of Pro controllers this year, and this is one of the more interesting ones. It feels great, looks slick and has some thoughtful touches, but it's also a little niche in how some of those features work across different platforms. So I'm going to break all of that down and who I think this controller is actually for, and by the end of this video, you'll know if the GameSir G7 Pro is worth your money. I was sent this controller for review, but as usual, all opinions are my own, and I haven't received any money or incentives to say anything about this product. The G7 Pro has been labelled a Pro controller, and it lives up to that name with a bevy of features. For starters, it has 4 additional buttons. You get 2 extra mini bumper buttons and 2 back buttons. These can be mapped to any of the standard inputs, including the face buttons, shoulder buttons, triggers, stick presses, and the D-pad directions. The triggers can be set to Hall effect or micro switches using a toggle on the controller. This switch has a nice smooth action, unlike plenty of other controllers I've tried. It has TMR sticks for drift-free precision, and the D-pad uses mechanical micro switches, which have 3 interchangeable designs. There are 4 rumble motors, 2 in the grips and 2 in the triggers. Oh yeah, and when connected to a PC, it has gyro functionality too. For connectivity, you have the option of wired and 2 types of wireless via Bluetooth or a 2.4 GHz dongle. In wired mode, it works with PC and Xbox. Using the dongle, it'll work with PC, and via Bluetooth, it works with Android. And yes, for anyone not paying attention, that means for Xbox, it only works using a wired connection. On the bottom, there's a 3.5mm audio jack, which is supported in both wired and 2.4G wireless modes. The controller actually allows you to adjust the volume of anything connected, as well as mix the game and chat volume. You don't get individual controls for each, but it does let you turn one up while simultaneously turning the other down. So for example, you can turn the game volume up while turning the chat volume down, or vice versa. There's even a couple of D-pad options that have icons for this. Next to the audio jack is the mic mute button, which can be operated both by a press on-off and a hold on release off. There's a little light to indicate when it's muted, although unfortunately if you're holding the button, it's impossible to see. The base station has 2 functions. It primarily acts as a charging dock and has a light on the bottom to indicate that it's charging. Underneath, there's a space for the 2.4G dongle, and what's really cool is that when plugged into a PC, with the dongle plugged in like this, the base station will allow the dongle to transmit. So you only need one USB port to charge and connect wirelessly using the dongle. Battery life isn't listed, but for what it's worth, it has a 1200 mAh battery. My estimates put it between 8 and 15 hours of usage, depending on the wireless mode and rumble settings. Charging can be done using the dock or from being plugged directly into a USB-C cable. Now on the controller, you can map commands to the extra buttons, you can save them into profiles, and you can calibrate it. Calibrating it is probably not something you're going to need to do often, but neat that you don't need software to do it. Of course, it does have a companion app. Using the GameSir Nexus, which is available on PC and Xbox, you can do everything previously mentioned, but beyond that you have control over lots of other stuff. This includes trigger and stick dead zones, vibration settings, gyro functions, you can change the brightness of the docking station's LED, and you can perform firmware updates. Any setting you change, either on the controller or in the software, can be saved to one of 4 profiles, which you can swap between on the controller using the M button and one of the 4 face buttons. In regards to the polling rate, using the PC software you can overclock it up to 1000 Hz. This is for both the wired and 2.4G connections, but just bear in mind that this is only when using the controller on PC. Setting it above 500 Hz also turns off trigger vibration, so there's a trade-off when using the highest setting. For Xbox, you're capped at the console's maximum polling rate of 250 Hz, although this is marginally faster than the 125 Hz that you get with a standard wireless controller. The only features it's missing that could be a deal breaker for some are a turbo function and the ability to create macros. Okay, so yeah, it has lots of whiz-bang features, but the most impressive thing from my point of view is the performance. The first thing you'll likely notice is how good it feels to hold. Sorry, I'm never going to be comfortable using the term hand feel.
The mouth feel of the Minionette.
Please don't say mouthfeel.
It weighs 272 grams, which feels solid without being heavy. The bottom of the grips are covered with a rubbery, grippy surface that feels really premium. I've used this for many hours of Battlefield and Sekiro, and my hands have never felt tired and my fingers don't rub uncomfortably against anything. Ergonomics can be quite subjective of course, but I reckon this is about as comfortable as controllers get. Every button and stick is easy to reach, and the other non-gameplay buttons like the M button are not at risk of being accidentally pressed. The mini shoulder buttons sit at the perfect distance from my fingertips without being in the way or being distracting. They're there when you need them and easy to ignore when you don't. The face buttons use optical micro switches, but they don't have the overly stiff feel that those switches can sometimes have. They're clicky with a small amount of rebound, and while they aren't mushy, there is a slight softness to the press. They require a deliberate defined press, so accidental input is unlikely. A minor complaint I have with these buttons is that the lettering is so subtle it's essentially pointless. You could argue that experienced Xbox players have these memorized, but I do occasionally need to look at these and see which button is which. Even in a well-lit room, it can be extremely hard to see the button labels. Now the back buttons are fairly discreet. You could argue too discreet as they sit almost flush with the body of the controller. If you don't want to use them, you can actually lock them, which prevents them from functioning and from moving. I haven't seen this feature before, and as someone who doesn't find back buttons to be helpful in every game, I find this little toggle extremely useful. Another feature I really like is when mapping buttons, the light on the front flashes to indicate which button you've selected. So for example, if I select the back left paddle, the bottom left of the light flashes. And if I select the top right mini bumper, the top right of the light flashes. The D-pad isn't amazing, but it's decent. You get a choice of 3 designs, which I think are all viable. The clickiness of the micro switches adds a nice extra layer of feedback. So, along with being able to clearly feel the direction you're pressing, you get a click to confirm that it's actually pressed. What lets it down is that the range of motion feels small. You can see with the faceplate off that the area containing the micro switches is quite compact, and it just doesn't feel 100% satisfying in practice. That said, it worked well for everything that I threw at it. Action platformers, fighting games, isometric games. It even passed the tank controls test with flying colours. The sticks though are great. They use TMR technology, which is a newer magnetic sensor with potential advantages over Hall effect designs. This is vastly superior to the potentiometer-based sticks that you'll find on older gamepads and even the Xbox Elite controllers. They feel smooth and responsive, delivering a good balance of speed and precision. For this reason, the G7 Pro will be my controller of choice moving forwards for Battlefield 6. The sticks come off easily as well if you ever need to replace them. On the top there's a removable brace to prevent the USB cable and connection from being damaged. This doesn't lock it into place, it simply prevents it from being pulled at an angle that might damage the connector. The faceplate is detachable as well. It uses a similar magnetic system as the rest of the G series controllers, which means that you can use faceplates from other GameSir controllers on the Pro. The only caveat here is that you might be limited to using a specific D-pad design. My G7HE faceplate, for example, only has the cutout for the classic D-pad design. Also, because the Pro's faceplate separates into 3 parts, it's not backwards compatible with the older G7 controllers. My main complaint with the GameSir G7 Pro is the lack of wireless support on Xbox. It does at least include a long-ass 3-meter cable, and GameSir also offers the G7 Pro Zenless Zone Zero edition for those who absolutely need wireless. Wireless functionality seems to add a significant premium to third-party controllers, probably due to licensing costs, which likely explains why the Zenless Zone Zero edition is priced much higher. Lack of Xbox wireless connectivity aside, I love just about everything else about it. The comfort, the weight, its intuitiveness, the fact that the features have real utility, and on top of all of that, this is one good-looking controller. It's also competitively priced. The Hori Wireless Fighting Commander Octa Pro that I recently reviewed costs quite a bit more and isn't anywhere near as practical. Likewise, the Xbox Elite 2 is also much more expensive, and is outperformed in a couple of areas such as the technology in the sticks and the inclusion of the charging dock. This is a solid wireless controller for PC, and a great step up from a basic Xbox pad if you want more features without paying Elite Series 2 prices. It does have a few trade-offs such as needing to use a cable with Xbox, but overall it's absolutely worth the investment if you ask me.